Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. We're going to be talking about stretching today. You know, there's a lot of information about stretching, misinformation about stretching. We're going to try to get to the bottom of it today. I'm sorry for the poor choice of shirts. I wore this orange shirt today and realized that the camera color is just whacked out now. So I won't wear it anymore, I promise. Before we get started, we have to thank our title sponsor, and that is Legendary Foods, makers of the tasty pastry, makers of seasoned almonds, makers of the best nut butters in the world, and their new tasty pastry, which is called Birthday Cake, is out of this world. 20 grams of protein, 0 sugar. Those of you who like the tasty pastry, remember the original tasty pastry was modeled after the Pop-Tart. It was a healthier, upgraded Pop-Tart with no sugar and 15 grams of protein or more. This tasty pastry, it's more like apple turnover crust instead of that hard Pop-Tart crust. It has to be experienced. It's delicious. The box went in a day in our home. They're unbelievable. If you go to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and use the code SHR10, SHR10, you'll save 10% off. Check them out. Show them some love. And by using that code, not only do you save 10%, but you also show them you learned about them here on Superhuman Radio. And now, without further delay, my guest today is Dr. Dain P. LaRoche. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for being here. And you are with the University of New Hampshire. And the exercise physiology department, correct?
Yes.
And you recently published a study looking at ballistic and static stretching. Why? I mean, with the body of information out there about stretching, why was this study needed?
Yeah, so there's a lot of piecemeal studies that have looked at, one type of stretching versus the other. They may have looked at the effect of, pre-exercise stretching on some measure of performance like vertical jump or sprinting or muscle strength or power. But usually they didn't have any mechanistic measures in there. In other words, they measured stretching, they measured the effects on performance, but they didn't actually see what was happening, within the muscle itself with respect to the elastic properties of the muscle or the ability of that muscle to generate strength and power, and then subsequently how that translates into athletic performance.
So let's just kind of talk a little bit about previous research, right? So like 20 years ago, people were saying stretching is a great thing. Then somewhere along the line, they looked at exclusively its effect on power after stretching. We're talking about static stretching. Mm-hmm. And they found out, oh my God, when you stretch before you lift weights, you're not as strong. Were those studies valid, or was there something lacking from those studies that kind of skewed the endpoints?
So, I think, stretching was seen as this, holistic, activity that you should do before exercise. And, if you go back 100 years in physical education textbooks or something, they'd say, make sure you stretch before you exercise. And if you ask anybody, they'll tell you, make sure you stretch before exercise. What was lacking, as you said, was the empirical evidence that stretching really, A, prevents injury, or B, improves performance. And so it was one of those, I wouldn't call it a myth, but it was just a common practice that everybody did. And over time, the evidence started to accumulate, where real studies were done and looked at, is there any evidence that suggests stretching prevents injury? And is there any evidence that stretching improves performance? And when people started, really digging into those questions, the waters became more and more muddy, right? So the tenets that we believed for forever that stretching was this really powerful, good thing, were put into question.
And is it possible that it's both, depending on, and people need to say, what's more important to me? At 62 years old, my flexibility is being challenged by a body that's turning to wood, and stretching is kind of a good thing for me. Is it one of those things where you have to say, look, pick your reason?
Yeah, for sure. Stretching is good. Don't get me wrong. It's probably more about the timing of stretching. Ian Schreier, a physician, did a nice review article, I think in 2004, that looked at the effects of pre-exercise stretching on performance, but also long-term stretching on performance. And the answers to the questions differed depending on how you ask them. So if you say, is stretching good for exercise performance, if it's done immediately before, powerful type activities, it does seem to impair them by anywhere from 5 to 20%, depending what it is. But if you stretch regularly over weeks and months, there's actually a different effect where stretching is associated with increased strength and increased, power performance. So it's not so much that stretching is good or bad. It may be more about the timing of it. And as you said, what's the purpose?
Excuse me. Can you define ballistic versus static stretching, please?
Yeah. So static stretching is generally where you change the joint position where you're placing a stretch on the muscle. Usually, you're instructed to reach some endpoint of mild discomfort, and you hold it there for anywhere from 15 to 30 seconds. Whereas ballistic stretching would be more of a bouncing type motion where you're moving in and out of the stretch, maybe once a second or once every 2 seconds. And that has probably some crossover with this idea of dynamic stretching, where you're putting the joints through a range of motion in a dynamic, pre-exercise warm up or something like that.
Can you really do dynamic or even ballistic stretching? So when you think of stretching, you're putting the muscle at a very compromised position because of its ability to adapt to the range of motion that you think it should have. And so, and in order to do that, the joints become at risk, right? Because the whole purpose of, not the whole purpose, but part of the purpose of the muscle is to keep the joint from overextending. Say the elbow. You don't want your elbow to bend backwards, right? And the bicep and the brachials help achieve the stability of that joint. Is it really possible to do ballistic stretching, considering that to really achieve it, you would have to put the joint at some risk at some point in the motion?
I think when people do ballistic stretching, they hit that same point of mild discomfort that you do with static stretching. So you're not going through a complete range of motion of the joint. You're not pushing the joint to its extremes. You're hitting that point of tension. You're going into that, stretch for a split second, and then you're bouncing back out of it. So you actually bring up two things there. One is ballistic stretching potentially bad for you. And there's really no evidence in the medical literature that ballistic stretching, as I described it, is harmful to the muscle. And, I like to tell people, think about doing a maximal deadlift or a squat or running down a mountain or any of those types of activities, even a rebound in basketball. The loads on the muscle are so much higher with an activity like that than they would ever be during a ballistic stretch.
True.
So your chance of hurting yourself doing a little bouncing toe touch, it's, when you really think about it, it's a little bit ridiculous, I think.
No, you're right. So talking about stretching, acute stretching right before a movement, I remember reading an article that basketball players have very tiny calves, little gastrocs, but they have these long soleuses and these long straps of tendons, and that their ability to jump is, for lack of better terms, the preload resistance that tendon adds. Is it possible that some of the strength that's lost in let's say before you lift weights, you stretch, is by making the you kind of lose the rigidity of the tendon that you're hoping is going to contribute to the snapback of force, And by stretching it, you kind of make it a little more pliable, and you don't have that preload any longer.
Yeah, Carl, you're exactly right. You know, the technical term for that is stiffness, and it's an engineering term. You know, when you create a stress versus strain curve, you look at the change in length of the muscle relative to the change in force. And you know, so if you want to think of an example, most people might be familiar with, if you think of like an elastic band, you know, like a resistance band, the real thin ones, it doesn't take much force to get them to change length. Whereas the thick ones, it takes a lot of force to get them to change length.
They're rigid, no more rigid.
Yeah, the thin band is less stiff, and the thick band is much stiffer. So the ability of the thin band to store energy is significantly less than the thick band.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, when people think of stiffness, the term stiffness, they often think of it as with a negative.
Uh-oh. I hope you can hear me. I think we just lost your internet connection.
So.
Oh, you're back. So
Okay.
what happened? We lost you right at the point where you said about the negative connotation of stiffness.
Okay. So, you know, stiffness, you know, you think of it as a negative thing, where in reality with stretch shortening cycles that are dynamic in nature, you place the muscle tendon unit into a lengthened position, and that elastic energy is stored in the tendon that's returned during the concentric phase of that activity. So when you talk about the tendon playing a role in jumping, it's really important. And the biomechanical studies, you know, have shown, you know, during walking and running that the tendon contributes like double the power of the muscle. And in fact, there's a really neat study that looked at changes in muscle length in the Achilles versus tendon length, in the gastroc. And they actually showed that the muscle contracts isometrically during running and jumping. And then actually the change in length that lets your ankle flex is happening in the Achilles tendon.
That's fascinating.
It is, yeah. So if you think about that the tendon is actually doing, you know, 2 to 3 times the power that the muscle is doing during jumping activities, that's a new appreciation, I think.
Yeah, that is fascinating. So talk about your study. How was the study designed?
Sure. So we had one group of people. They were college-aged men and women, recreationally active, you know, physically fit, but not athletes. And they were randomized to 3 conditions. So everybody did the same 3 conditions. There was a control condition where there was no stretching. There was a ballistic stretching condition where they stretched most of the major muscle groups of the lower extremity, and a static stretching condition that was basically the same stretches as the ballistic stretching, but held for, you know, 30 seconds at a time. Mm-hmm. And so they did these activities, and then they were placed on a dynamometer, like a Cybex dynamometer that measures strength, but in a prone position. And I don't know, can I share my screen with you?
Yeah, please.
For that?
Yeah, you should be able to do that simply.
Yeah,
just
hold on, I think I got it.
Yeah, please, take your time.
Can you see? You may have to let me.
Here it is. Yeah, I'm gonna put it up now. Here, I'm adding it to.
Yeah,
Bam.
so there's our dynamometer in the lab. And basically, we attach the foot to a rigid plate, and there's a motor there that will move the foot from plantar flexion, or the toes pointed, into dorsiflexion, basically stretching the muscle tendon unit of the calf. And the dynamometer measures the resistive force. And so what that means is the person is totally relaxed at this point. And you're just measuring the tension that's experienced as you stretch the muscle. And when you do that, you get a curve that looks like this, okay? So there's an exponential increase in the resistive torque or force that you encounter in the muscle, right, as you go up, as you change the muscle length. And so from that, we can get a couple of measures. So one would be simply the range of motion, right? So we can measure what is the maximum ankle position that you could achieve, but we could also measure the resistive torque that's being encountered.
Right, before the muscles are even engaged.
Yeah, exactly. So the muscle's passive, it's relaxed, but you're experiencing this elastic stretch like you would with a rubber band, right? And so from that, we can calculate the stiffness, which is this slope of the muscle length versus tension curve. And then another thing that I'll talk about is energy storage, or strain energy. And this is that elastic energy that is stored in return during jumping or any other type of dynamic activity. And that's actually calculated as the area under that curve. So let me stop sharing here. So that gives you an idea of the measures that we took on the dynamometer. We then asked the participants to do maximal contractions. We did get strength measures and a maximal power test on the dynamometer. Then they were moved over to a force plate, and on the force plate, they did a vertical jump with a vertex there to measure their jump height. But what the force plate lets us do is measure a couple of things like velocity of the center of mass, like how quickly they're moving in upwards direction, the maximum forces that they generate, the rate at which they generate force, and their whole body power during the vertical jump. So it's a really sensitive way to look at this vertical jump performance. And so we then tested, were any of those measures different between the static, control, or ballistic condition?
That's fascinating. That the fact that you're able to have all of those data points. I hope we didn't lose you again. It looks like your screen has frozen. So
yeah, I'm back.
Okay. It's interesting to me because you have all of those data points ahead of time. And now you're going to say, let's see what changes based on this type of stretching versus that type of stretch. So what did you learn?
So interestingly, we didn't see a big deficit in strength with either static or ballistic stretching. We did see a reduction in power of about, let me look here real quick. Power was down about 8% in the
now, for those of us who are going to you, wait a minute, you said there's no difference in strength, but there's a difference in power. Explain from a clinical standpoint what you're looking at in each of those cases.
Okay, so the way we measured strength was isometrically. So maximal isometric contraction on the dynamometer, which is different than if you were doing like, a maximal bench press or something that was dynamic and went through the stretch shortening cycle. So I think that might be part of the reason. There was no change in muscle length during the strength test, whereas the power test requires that the ankle be moving throughout the test. And so that was done actually at a different velocity, at a higher velocity on the dynamometer. And there was a preload there, as you said, where the muscle was actually placed in the stretched position so that the person could then powerfully plantar flex.
Right.
So
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was no significant difference between these two, or there was a significant difference between power and strength? I was so fast to ask you that question.
Yeah. So there wasn't really a major effect of stretching on strength, but there was about an 8% reduction in power for the static stretching and about a 3% non-significant reduction in power for ballistic.
Do you think that's because ballistic does have a lesser effect on the stiffness of the soft tissue involved?
I think there's two factors. One is that ballistic, in theory, would affect the stiffness less because you're only placing the muscle at a lengthened position for a short period of time. And we know that when muscle and tendon stretches, it exhibits what's called viscoelastic behavior, which means it loses tension over time, right? So if you get into a deep hamstring stretch, you feel it start to slowly release over time.
Right.
So ballistic stretching gets you to that point, but boom, you're back out of it. And so there's not that time for that viscoelastic stress relaxation. The second is probably neural excitability. We know that the stretch reflex is attenuated with static stretching. So when you hold the position of a stretch for a long period of time, you're shutting down the sensitivity of those muscle spindles that play a role in the stretch reflex. So I think it's probably a combination of both, although we can't say for sure. There's probably less muscle tendon unit changes with the ballistic stretching and probably some preserved neuromuscular excitability.
Does different type of muscle fiber or different muscle fiber type play a role in the response to ballistic versus static stretching? Say you have a distance runner, they're long, sinewy muscles versus a sprinter who's got almost muscles in their lower body like a bodybuilder, just more fast twitch. Does that play a role in your outcome from stretching?
Yeah, that'd be really hard to speculate. Those studies have not been done. Obviously you need muscle biopsies to get the fiber type. And
yeah, nobody wants muscle biopsies.
Yeah, exactly. Including me. Yeah, I'd have a real tough time saying anything about fiber type versus response to stretching interventions. I think maybe the power might be more compromised, in somebody who's focused on that than the endurance activity. But
okay, what exactly is work absorption? That was some metric that you used to right?
Yep. So that was the area under the muscle length tension curve. And you can think of it as stored elastic energy.
Okay.
So work absorption is another name for strain energy or elastic energy. If you think about a bow, if you're shooting a bow and arrow, you pull the string back and you store energy in the limbs, and then when you let go, that energy is returned. So that's what work absorption is.
Okay. So was there any significant difference in the static versus ballistic that would make you say, well, for this type of an athlete, this is a better way to stretch?
So you do see, generally speaking, greater changes in those stiffness work absorption parameters with the static stretching. In other words, if you do want to reduce the stiffness, let's say you were a gymnast who was just trying to achieve a certain position that required a lot of flexibility, or a dancer, the static stretching would actually help you achieve that greater range of motion, because it would cause the muscle and tendon to relax a little bit more. I vaguely remember a study or two that looked at endurance athletes. For some muscle groups, they had better running economy following static stretching, because you kind of freed up, the muscles about the joint, so the limb could, swing more fluidly with less resistance. So there may be some instances where you're trying to improve range of motion, and static stretching would be the more appropriate technique for that.
Now, if someone is a weekend warrior, they do cardio, but they're focused on weightlifting, does it make more sense to do static stretching after training with weights?
Yeah, that's the general recommendation. Do a light warm up, whether it's lifting the weights at a lighter weight, or going through a dynamic warm up, or even some light cardio before you lift. And then if you're working on trying to maintain your flexibility and range of motion, do the stretching afterwards. And that's actually a really good time for it, because the muscles are already warmed up, and they'll be more pliable and susceptible to that stretching at that point.
And I want to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about something that you just kind of implied to, and that is that there was a study once that implied that stretching before weightlifting made you more prone to injury. I don't know if you remember that was going around maybe about a decade ago. And a lot of personal trainers were saying, oh, you don't want to stretch before you train because you're going to be more prone to injury. Let's address that and find out if it's a myth on the other side of the break, okay?
All righty.
All right, stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Superhuman Radio. By now, you're aware of the cognitive benefits of nootropics. My friends over at Pure Nootropics are giving my listeners 10 to 30% off their already great prices on over 70 high-quality nootropics. Stock up on DHM so you can feel good after your holiday celebration, or try the Superhuman Stack to boost your brain and energize your day. Go to shrnetwork.biz/pure, that's PURE, and start saving today. Are you ready to change the way you age? Of course you are. That's why you're here. Juvicel is a new first-of-its-kind dietary supplement that includes 10 key research-backed ingredients shown in studies to support lifespan. Things like resveratrol, fisetin, quercetin, pterostilbene, sulforaphane, turmeric, all in a single dose. You may have some of these ingredients already, but Juvicel is the first to combine them all into a single product to support your lifespan. It's vegan, non-GMO, and sustainable. Live better longer with Juvicel. Go to shrnetwork.biz/live better. Use code SHR and save 20% off today. TaylorMade Health is focused on making sure you're able to perform and look your best. They are a leader in game-changing supplements and cosmetic products. Whether you want to increase strength, expedite recovery, facilitate soft tissue repair, or reduce deep wrinkles, TaylorMade Health has you covered. TaylorMade Health is also the home to Dr. Seed's products such as BPC, BPC Plus, and the Chill Pill. All of my listeners can now get 20% off their first order with code TRY20. That's TRY20. This code can even be used on subscription orders. Visit shrnetwork.biz/try20 today and use code TRY20 for 20% off your first order. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000, or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. Getting a massage post-workout is a proven strategy to facilitate better recovery. Getting to a massage therapist can be difficult and expensive, especially in these times. The solution is the Meteor, a heated massage ball from Milestorm. Reduce pain and soreness and expedite recovery with the Meteor's research-backed vibration settings and therapeutic heat. It's convenient for travel and works on any body part. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Meteor and use code SHR15 for 15% off and free shipping if you buy 2 or more. Start recovering better today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, where brawn and brains finally meet.
Welcome back. We're talking with Dr. Dain P. LaRoche from the University of New Hampshire. So we have some comments. I'm going to put these up because they kind of lead into the question. Peter Rouse, who is we've actually done shows in the past about plyometrics and stuff like that. He's saying you don't stretch, then try to do a max lift. You first perform warm-ups, and you indicated that. You did say that. So he posted that before we discussed that. Brandon Green said, what about iso extremes, Jay Schroeder? What are iso extremes, and what's the purpose of them?
That's a new term for me. I don't know if we can define that for me. That might be helpful.
Yeah, maybe if you could put a little bit more, Brandon, about what that is. How about yielding isometrics at the stretch position? What is that? Any idea?
Yeah, I'm just speculating here, but it sounds like, you get into a lengthened position, where the muscle is stretched, and then perform some contractions there. The thing I'm thinking about is the length tension relationship of muscle. That's like an inverted U, and you produce your peak force roughly about 50% of resting muscle length. And there's definitely something to be said about trying to increase your strength at the ends of the range of motion, because that's where the muscle is weakest. And there are studies that show that, that the gains in strength are joint angle specific. So if you're trying to build strength towards the either the lengthened or shortened end of the muscle range of motion, that seems like a good idea, particularly for activities, where you're finding yourself in those positions routinely. If there was a sport that required, a lot of crouching or something like that.
Do you know who Doug Brignoli is by any chance?
I do not.
So this question, he can't answer this, Bill. Doug Brignoli is he's written he was just on my show recently. He's a brilliant guy. He's 61 years old. He's super muscular, super lean. He's in great shape, never had an injury, and he's developed a style of training that focuses on isolation movements, but he looks at the way the muscle was developed to move. And then you do isolation movements based on that. And, he's not a fan of like the squat, for instance. Mm-hmm. You don't have to squat. You can build big legs and big, strong legs, but it's not fair to put that question there because it's biomechanical expert and former Mr. America. Correct. Thank you. Here. In other words, not angle specific. I guess he's talking about his yielding isometric, or let me see, what question was that? Iso extremes. But I mean, that still doesn't tell us what we need to know, I think, to answer the question properly. So, no one is suggesting, and Peter Rouse posted here, who stretches and then does a max lift without warm-ups. No one is suggesting that at all. Mm-hmm. You don't do anything without a warm-up unless you want to injure yourself. But what about probably about a decade ago, there was some rumblings amongst the bodybuilding forums and so on that stretching before training made you more prone to injury. Where did that come from? And is there any validation to that? Oh, we lost the internet connection again. Just bear with us, folks. It seems to just drop out here and there.
I think we got too many people on the home Wi-Fi here.
Yeah, I think so. So what?
Yeah, I heard you.
Where did that come from?
So I'm thinking, I don't recall any study, and I read the literature pretty regularly, and I could have missed it, but sometimes, well, oftentimes things come out of practice before they've been researched, right? And I think that happens more often than not. People experiment in the gym, they figure something out, they notice trends, and sometimes there's credence to it, and other times after we do the studies, there isn't. But I could definitely see where if you did do stretching before exercise and you did have that, anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15% reduction in strength, in that, if we go with this idea that the tendon is doing some of the work and you've lost the ability to store some of that strain energy in the tendon, then the load gets transferred to the muscle. Right? So one thing I like to think about, and I tell my students this, is that, for any joint action, any activity, there's two things that are contributing to the force production. One is the elastic energy storage in the tendon, and the other is the active muscle contraction. And they sum to give you the total force production of that muscle tendon unit.
Right.
So if you're losing some of the ability to store and return strain energy, that load is being shifted more so to the muscle. And you could get yourself in an overload situation if you did have that reduction in stiffness and energy storage. So I definitely see a mechanism there. I just don't know if it's been studied.
Yeah, and it makes sense because if you're looking at if the sum of everything working together is 100% of your strength,
mm-hmm.
and doing static stretching before training is eliminating some of that strength that we're getting from stiffness or however you want to put it, then more work is being done by the muscle. Or the muscle can't really handle the weight that you're used to handling, and now you're going to injure yourself.
Right.
So it does make sense. Peter's pointing out that they perform static stretches between sets of max lifts. He believes it was in the leg extension. And I think that was something like that I had heard back then as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think stretching should be looked in the same way as you do any other training. Any stress you put on the muscle is going to deplete the muscle's ability to continue working, to handle maximum. I mean, no one would say, go in and do 10 sets of this weight in this movement. Now go and train that body part. You say, no, you just did 10 sets. Like your body part is going to be exhausted. I kind of feel like stretching should be viewed, even though the desired outcomes are different. It should be viewed the same way you do anything else, a warm-up or a set of something. You're taxing the muscle in one way or another. You're going to change the way that muscle functions after that stretch. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, certainly. And one thing we found when digging through the literature is that there appears to be a dose-response relationship. And what I mean by that is, the studies that show, the biggest negative effects of stretching on strength and power seem to be the ones that have the biggest stretching intervention. Some of them are like 13 sets of 30 seconds of stretching, or another one was done by a dynamometer where the dynamometer was cranking the muscle through, a full range of motion stretch once a second. I mean, people don't normally do that. So, if you go and you do some light static stretching, but you're not really taxing yourself, I don't think it's going to have a major negative effect on your performance. And then the second thing is the time effect. When you do reduce the stiffness and work absorption capacity of the muscle, it returns back to normal anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes post-stretch. So if you did a light warm-up and you did some stretching and you kind of went through setting up your gym or through some light sets or something, 20 to 30 minutes later, you might not experience any negative effects of the stretching at all. And that's what we found in our study with the vertical jump. 20 minutes, the vertical jump wasn't done until 20 minutes after the stretching because of the other measures we were making. And there was no negative effects on vertical jump.
Yeah, so what we're really talking, again, that this kind of feeds into what I was just suggesting, that stretching should be viewed like any other thing that taxes the muscle. and recovery is going to reverse everything back to its previous settings, if you will, for lack of better terms. That makes perfect sense. Guys who are going after just strength gains will rest 5 minutes before sets. Why? Because they recover better and they can be strong again. But those of us who are looking for metabolic conditioning or lactate training, we're going to rest 1 minute. We're not as strong on that second set as if we would have rested for 5 minutes. And this comes full circle to what I said. I think stretching needs to be viewed just like anything else you do in the gym. It should be, if you know that working your body for an hour is all you can give it, and then you want to do 15 to 20 minutes of stretching before and then work for an hour, that needs to be added to the load of what you're doing to your body that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
What about, one of the things that I started doing years ago, and I haven't done it in a long time, was stretching under load. Dante Trudel made this very popular back in the 1990s with his dog crap training, and it worked well for me. It's designed to not only strengthen soft tissue insertions and originations, but there's a lot of evidence that stretching under a load increases something that you probably have no interest in, but the androgen receptor biosynthesis in tissue. And that's a big thing if you're using gear. If you're using drugs, you want more androgen receptors that are going to be stimulated by the drugs. And basically, like in a bench press, you would take 2 100-pound dumbbells, and you would lay on a bench, and you would come down, and you would just allow the weight to just literally tear you, like pull your pecs apart, and it would hurt. And I used to do it for time, a minute and a half. I do 2 or 3 sets of that for a minute and a half, and it was so painful while you were doing it, but my chest never responded better. I'm one of those guys that has a hard time growing his chest. When I started doing loaded stretching, that was a game changer for me. And I probably will reinvestigate it here now that I'm talking about it. Any value? Is there any research, anything in the literature about loaded stretching?
Yeah, first of all, that sounds like a medieval torture rack, but
yeah, it was. It really was. It was.
Yeah, there was evidence of stretch-induced hypertrophy, and I don't remember the exact title of the study, but there was, a long time ago, they did a study with weights on chickens' wings, where they were basically held in a stretch position. They were dragging these things around, and I remember that there was an increase in the number of sarcomeres within the muscle. The muscle fibers were actually elongating, and it does induce hypertrophy in a different way than you might get from an active dynamic type contraction. So I think that's a neat idea, where you're challenging the muscle in another way. And I think for the elite athlete and the high performers who are looking for those additional couple of % gains, I think that's probably a neat approach to try to shake out of your routine. I'd be concerned about doing that with somebody who's a recreational person and doesn't have a lot of experience. No. Unless they start light, right? If they did the same thing you just talked about with 5-pound dumbbells, maybe they're able to improve their shoulder range of motion.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a pretty neat approach.
I mean, you have to be strong enough to do this to push out of it. Like you can't take a weight that you're not used to handling and just get into that position and stay there. I have done it to where my muscles were so exhausted by the third set, if you want to call it that I didn't want to have to push the weight out. I would just roll my elbows out and just drop the weight. But you would have an immediate pump that would last you for hours. And it was pretty phenomenal. I guess loaded stretching works, but extreme isometrics worked better. And it sounds to me like extreme isometrics is probably like when I think of a male gymnast, right? They get into that position with the rings, right? And everything is just locked in isometrically, and you're holding it until you just completely fail. In their case, they don't fail, otherwise they wouldn't be at the Olympics. But I guess that might be more what extreme isometric is about. I'm guessing from Brandon Green's comments here. We're going to take our last commercial break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up the discussion. You're listening to and watching Superhuman Radio. Share the show with your friends. We'll be right back with more. Stay tuned. By now, you're aware of the cognitive benefits of nootropics. My friends over at Pure Nootropics are giving my listeners 10 to 30% off their already great prices on over 70 high-quality nootropics. Stock up on DHM so you can feel good after your holiday celebration, or try the Superhuman Stack to boost your brain and energize your day. Go to shrnetwork.biz/pure, that's PURE, and start saving today.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said that all disease begins in your gut. That's why it's so important to protect yourself with boosted immune system. If you drink coffee, tea, smoothies, or really any beverage in the morning, and you're looking for a tasty way to start your day and defend yourself against harmful bacteria, then I have just the thing for you to try. It's called the Ultimate Immunity Protection Stack, and it was put together by my friends over at Bioptimizers. Their immunity stack has 3 products which contain over 18 natural herbs and probiotic blends formulated to fight and eliminate bad bacteria like E. coli, salmonella, gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, and repair compromised gut lining. It also includes psychobiotics, which help increase serotonin and happy chemicals to naturally elevate your mood, performance, and cognitive function with no side effects or dependencies. It's a great addition to your morning routine, and it tastes amazing. Just stir it into any beverage, sip, and enjoy. It's the ultimate way to boost your immune system right before the holiday season. Go to shrnetwork.biz/protect and use code SHR10 and save an extra 10% off on the. You won't find this deal or stack anywhere else. For fast shipping and the best deal, go to shrnetwork.biz/protect today. Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor, strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. Are you ready to change the way you age? Of course you are. That's why you're here. Juvicel is a new first-of-its-kind dietary supplement that includes 10 key research-backed ingredients shown in studies to support lifespan. Things like resveratrol, fisetin, quercetin, pterostilbene, sulforaphane, turmeric, all in a single dose. You may have some of these ingredients already, but Juvicel is the first to combine them all into a single product to support your lifespan. It's vegan, non-GMO, and sustainable. Live better longer with Juvicel. Go to shrnetwork.biz/live better. Use code SHR and save 20% off today.
This is the Superhuman Channel, doing reps with the weight of the world.
Welcome back. Talking with Dr. Dain LaRoche from the University of New Hampshire about stretching. Stretching, you know, I keep waiting for the one piece of research that says this is how you do it, this is what you do it for, this is when you do it. You think you can extrapolate for the audience? So if you wanted to say to people, okay, best practices for stretching. If your goal is this, do it this way. If your goal is this, do it that way. What do you think?
Sure. So, if you look at like what the American College of Sports Medicine recommends for health and fitness, they actually recommend that most Americans participate in stretching, 3 to 7 days per week or something like that. So it's been, thought of as an important component to an overall, healthy lifestyle, right? So, you have to think about whether you're stretching for performance or just trying to maintain flexibility, to reduce low back pain or things along those lines. I think that, the general recommendation is that everybody should be doing some type of stretching, whether it's yoga or dynamic, ballistic, static. I think that matters less, in other words, that they're putting their muscle through a range of motion. When we do go through like a full body stretching routine, you always find that muscle group that you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that one was so tight,
Right.
And sometimes you find those things and you can work on them when you do regularly stretch. Whereas, if you just go through your usual routine in the gym, you might not. So as far as best
I hope you can hear me. We lost you as far as best practices.
Would be appropriate.
We lost you at as far as best practices.
Yeah, so best practices would be, maybe 3 to 5 sets of 15 to 30 seconds static stretching for each of the major muscle groups of the body, right? And if you did that, 2 or 3 or 4 days a week, I think you'd be doing yourself good. Now, you wouldn't want to do that right before your exercise, as we've said. There is some evidence that static stretching in particular
The internet is becoming less and less cooperative, Doc.
Yeah, we're here again. So,
no, just pick it up from 3 to 5 days a week, and
3 to 5 days a week, static stretching. Major muscle groups. 15 to 30 seconds. Per stretch, and avoiding doing that before activities that require strength and power. Right.
Right.
Do it on your cardio day, maybe. Right. After you finish your cardio workout or whatever.
What do you think? So like I get in my inversion table at the end of the day, because by then gravity has been pushing my spine down continuously more and more. So I'm as compressed as I'm going to be at the end of the day. So I get in the inversion table, I decompress, then I get in bed and I stay in that decompressed state for 8 hours, right? So you think if somebody said, what, I want to stretch more, I don't want to stretch before training. I get to the gym, it's like I just have barely enough time to train. I don't want to have to stretch for 15 minutes before or after. You think just stretch first thing in the morning, stretch last thing at the night, at the end of the day? What do you think?
I mean, if you're looking for time to do it, when you're sitting there watching TV in the evening, why not get off the couch and do a little bit of commercial breaks or whatever? Not that we have commercials anymore necessarily, but
yeah, I know, right? No, I watch Pluto TV. They have plenty of commercials.
All right. Yeah, and just mixing it in. I mean, I'll find myself standing in a line somewhere and like, oh, I'm feeling tight in my low back, and I'll reach down and, without shame, do a hamstring stretch somewhere in the middle, out in public. But I don't think it has to be something that you're carving out big chunks of time. You just need to kind of work it in where you can.
What did our ancestors do? When I say ancestors, what did our laboring prehistoric ancestors do? They hung from trees, you know what I mean? They climbed stuff. They did things that had an innate stretching mechanism to it, right? Look at me. I'm going to sit in this chair for at least 3 hours today, maybe 4. I do that 5 days a week. Is it as simple as that? Is it as simple as that? Maybe there's people out there who don't really need to stretch because their day-to-day activities. I keep saying the guy who mows my lawn is going to be healthier than me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even doing resistance training, you're putting the muscles through a range of motion. So there was a myth for a long time that resistance trained people have poor flexibility and they can't do this, they can't touch their toes. Look at an Olympic lifter and how close their butt gets to the ground when they're doing a snatch, right? So I totally agree with you. If more people were engaged in more whole body rigorous activity on a daily basis, it wouldn't be as much of an issue. So I worry less about the people that are doing routine full body workouts. And worry more about the people, like you said, that are, working in an office and then they spin on a bike for 30 minutes and they call it good.
Yeah, I know, right? Peloton. It's funny, right? So you get up in the morning, you sit, maybe you have breakfast, maybe you don't. You sit on the train or you sit on the bus, you sit in your car, you get to your office, you sit in your office, you leave your office, you go home, you sit down for dinner, then you sit and watch the news, and then you lay down in bed. And, it's really funny to me because everybody wants to know why, we're such a sick society. And I can tell you, in fact, I'm going to talk after we're done with your interview. I want to talk to the audience about the importance of just walking every day. For years, I did cardio every day, an hour and a half of cardio every day. It was part of my routine. And then I had 2 foot surgeries in 2019. And I wasn't even training legs, and my lower body fell apart, and walking became a chore. And so I avoided walking. And I realize now that I've avoided walking to the point where I have maladies. I'm not going to call them illnesses because I'm already reversing them just by walking every day again. Mm-hmm. And so, when we look at the level of illness, everybody wants to point at something. Well, it's fat, it's meat, it's this, it's the lack of activity. It's just because what I've learned in the past 20 years, because you don't know my beginning, but I used to be 330 pounds. I was being fitted for a pacemaker.
Wow.
And like, I don't take anything except I take testosterone and thyroid hormone, and that's it. And so like when I look at how I got sick in the first place, and it was from lack of activity. And I can tell you that no matter how sick you are right now, if you just do your best to be more active, you will get better. It won't happen overnight. You know, you can't take 10 years and destroy your body and go, oh, I'm going to get better in 6 months. You got to give it some years. But the lack of activity in our population today is really at the root of all the illnesses that we have here. And all illnesses you'd fare better if you just were more active. And if you were more active, you probably wouldn't need to stretch as much because you'd be up and around and doing stuff,
Right.
bending over and lifting things up. You know, it's everybody wants to talk about diseases of modernity. All the diseases of modernity, in my humble opinion, come from the lack of activity.
Yeah, it's a big one. Muscle now is being seen as an endocrine organ, that's releasing cytokines that are having positive effects on distant organs and tissues. From everything from the brain and dementia to cardiovascular, pulmonary health, metabolic diseases. There's some really neat research coming out about timing of walking and exercise after meals and glucose control.
Oh, I know.
A 10-minute walk after breakfast, lunch, and dinner will do wonders for helping you regulate blood sugar.
But I have to be honest with you. So rest and digest is a real thing. There are things that we do because we are a sick population, like fiber, for instance. Fiber is all the rage today because it lowers gastric emptying, which blunts the glycemic index of high glycemic foods. But if you look at us from an evolutionary perspective, high fiber was a problem. Our high fiber ancestors, Australopithecus, spent all waking hours finding and chewing food. They had huge distended guts because they were literally eating tree bark and stuff like that. You talk about fiber. But fiber in modern day today even back then, it was a disadvantage. It took longer to digest. You had to eat more. So fiber in a sick population like we have today, yeah, it's a remedy. But if you're healthy, you don't need a lot of fiber. You can just get the fiber from the vegetables that you're including in your meals. And the reason I point that out is because, yes, you're right. There are 2 well-done studies that show that walking after a meal lowers postprandial glucose better than metformin.
Mm-hmm. And it's free.
Yeah. In fact, one study showed standing after a meal, not even walking, standing after a meal blunted the high blood sugar spike seen in people with diabetes. They're standing. But the reality is that if you're healthy and you're strong and you're vibrant, resting after a meal is more important. And that's why rest and digest is a critical aspect. But that's, when today we look at things through the eyes of a sick population. And so it's a little murky, let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
But for sick people, yeah, just standing after me. In fact, I wanted to do an ad campaign on TV called Stand After a Meal to Cure Your Diabetes, and have celebrities showing that they just finished a meal and they're going to stand up and walk around the house. Maybe we could find some dancers to dance after a meal. And like whatever your activity is, just get up and move after a meal and you'll cure your own diabetes. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to do today because people don't want to do it.
Right.
They don't want to do it. So in summary, what would you like both clinicians and lay people to take away from your study?
Sure. I think, like we said, the misconceptions about stretching before exercise as being performance improving and potentially reducing injury risk. There's not much evidence in that area, although the long-term stretching seems to have positive effects on strength and power and range of motion. So including stretching in your usual exercise routine is important. You just have to be a little bit careful about the timing of it if you're looking to maximize, performance.
Great stuff. Listen, thanks for being here today on the show.
Yeah, it was great joining you, Carl. I appreciate it.
Take care. We're going to take one quick commercial break. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about something that I started doing for the new year, and it's changing my life once again. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000, or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. TaylorMade Health is focused on making sure you're able to perform and look your best. They are a leader in game-changing supplements and cosmetic products. Whether you want to increase strength, expedite recovery, facilitate soft tissue repair, or reduce deep wrinkles, TaylorMade Health has you covered. TaylorMade Health is also the home to Dr. Seed's products such as BPC, BPC Plus, and the Chill Pill. All of my listeners can now get 20% off their first order with code TRY20. That's TRY20. This code can even be used on subscription orders. Visit shrnetwork.biz/try20 today and use code TRY20 for 20% off your first order. By now, you're aware of the cognitive benefits of nootropics. My friends over at Pure Nootropics are giving my listeners 10 to 30% off their already great prices on over 70 high-quality nootropics. Stock up on DHM so you can feel good after your holiday celebration, or try the Superhuman Stack to boost your brain and energize your day. Go to shrnetwork.biz/pure, that's PURE, and start saving today. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said that all disease begins in your gut. That's why it's so important to protect yourself with boosted immune system. If you drink coffee, tea, smoothies, or really any beverage in the morning, and you're looking for a tasty way to start your day and defend yourself against harmful bacteria, then I have just the thing for you to try. It's called the Ultimate Immunity Protection Stack, and it was put together by my friends over at Bioptimizers. Their immunity stack has 3 products which contain over 18 natural herbs and probiotic blends formulated to fight and eliminate bad bacteria like E. coli, salmonella, gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria, and repair compromised gut lining. It also includes psychobiotics, which help increase serotonin and happy chemicals to naturally elevate your mood, performance, and cognitive function with no side effects or dependencies. It's a great addition to your morning routine, and it tastes amazing. Just stir it into any beverage, sip, and enjoy. It's the ultimate way to boost your immune system right before the holiday season. Go to shrnetwork.biz/protect and use code SHR10 and save an extra 10% off on the. You won't find this deal or stack anywhere else. For fast shipping and the best deal, go to shrnetwork.biz/protect today.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
It's fascinating. Bill Bergman and Peter Rouse have a great discussion going on the Facebook post, going back and forth. Peter Rouse makes a really good point here. I want to put it up. He says, it seems like the majority of people are fat and lazy these days. Interesting. This never gets discussed when looking at helping those at risk of COVID. And he's right. But the problem with it is, if they want to be protected from COVID, it may be too late. They had to start a year ago or even 6 months ago. But he's right. The truth of the matter is, like with this COVID epidemic, if the majority of people were healthy, we wouldn't be scared of this virus at all. It wouldn't have the death rate. We know that the susceptibility to die from this virus is for those over 70, but there's a reason for that, because of the accumulation of senescent cells. And there's ways to rid yourself of senescent cells. And training. There was one study that we talked about on the show last year that showed that a single bout of resistance training reduced muscle senescent cells by something like 68%, and they were still eating a high-protein diet, which means that they were still turning on mTOR. So you're right. But unfortunately, if you can't even get people to stand after a meal to lower their blood sugar, How are you going to get them to go to the gym? But anyway, yeah, I had Judy Mikovits on the show twice. I had her on twice. I don't know if you noticed it. They actually took the video down YouTube, but then they finally put it back up. Anyway, so here's what I want to talk about. As I kind of alluded to in the last interview, I stopped doing cardio. I stopped doing cardio for a couple of reasons. Number one, the reminder that my left foot isn't like it used to be just disgusted me, made me very sad. I lost more muscle in my lower body than my upper body in the past couple of years because I really couldn't train legs heavy anymore. My left foot has led to a left knee problem. I am going to get it taken care of this year. And so I stopped doing any cardio. I was going to the gym and lifting, and I had a lot of false starts where I would train for 2 months straight, and I'd really see great changes in my body, and then something would derail me. A lot of times it was COVID related. The gym would close down. We have a new home now. We're in the process of building a really nice home gym, but it's not done yet. And so New Year's Eve, I was invited to come to Brentwood, Tennessee, to spend New Year's Eve with Aaron Singerman and his family. And Elisa and I went. There were other families there too, and it was just a great time. We had a fantastic time with Aaron. So Aaron religiously is out the door every morning at 6:30. He walks 5 miles. And those of you who are fans of his know that he does Facebook Lives and stuff, while he's walking. And he has a lot of people who communicate back and forth with him. So this one morning, I guess it was probably New Year's Eve morning. It was raining and it was cold. And Aaron was getting ready to go out to walk. And I says, how far do you usually walk? He says, 5 miles. And the first thing I thought to myself was, man, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could walk 5 miles. I haven't walked a mile in God knows how long. Like, how could I do 5 miles? And Aaron didn't push. He didn't say, come on. He goes, I says, how long does it take you to do 5 miles? He says, about an hour, hour and a half. And I said, I'm going to go with you. I have crappy sneakers. I got a left foot that doesn't work. I got a left knee that wants to cause me problems, actually from an old skiing accident when I was like 19 years old. I lost the ACL on my left knee. And so I says, I'm going to go with you. And I didn't dress warm enough. He warned me. He says, Carl, you need a jacket. You need gloves. And I didn't have gloves. And I just had basically a hoodie and a little jacket over it. And that was it. But we walked and we had fascinating conversation, which made the walk go so fast. And so at one point in time, I said to Aaron, how far have we gone? And he pulled out his phone because he has this app that tracks his walks using GPS. And he says, we've walked 4.5 miles. I was like, I can't believe it. I says, I am starting to feel it. He says, yeah, I can tell. He says, your stride is starting to shorten. And I felt bad. I didn't want to hold him back. I said, how far are we from the house? And he said, a mile. And so he rerouted us and took me back to the house. And then he went out and he did like 6 miles that morning. But it showed me that my willpower is still very strong. My ability to endure pain and discomfort is still very, very strong. And I've acquired that over decades of heavy resistance training. So I downloaded the app and I've walked every single day now. Every single day. I haven't missed a day. Only 45 minutes because I'm going to the gym in the evening. So basically now I've gone from being fairly inactive to very active. Walk in the morning, go to the gym and train for an hour in the evening. Like today I'm off. I'm doing 2 days on, 1 day off. So today I'm off. I'll train tomorrow and the day after. The point is, I was developing some scary symptoms. I've talked about them on the show, right? My legs don't want to work. I've had 3 people say to me, it sounds to me like you have multiple sclerosis. I have some balance issues all of a sudden. Well, in just a week's time of walking every morning and going to the gym in the evening, I can tell you I feel 1,000% better mentally and physically. I don't have near as bad of balance issues. They feel like they're going away. My legs don't hurt. My legs used to hurt all the time. I told Rob Regish the other couple weeks ago that my legs burn all the time, like I just finished running 10 miles, like there's lactate buildup. And my legs aren't hurting me at all. In fact, I wake up in the morning and my legs are very flexible and responsive, and I jog down the stairs, and it's like, oh my God, and this is just after a week. This is just after a week. I remember watching a documentary about babies. Elisa and I watched it. And babies, once they learn how to walk, they'll do 15,000 steps in a day. In fact, walking is the number one biggest achievement that launches us everything. The growth of our body, the growth of our brain, everything. Walking could be potentially, just walking, one of the most important acts of activity that we as humans have. And so many of us don't walk anymore at all. I'm going to start exploring more shows about walking. Oh, by the way, my lower back, my lumbar spine that was bothering me and causing my hip to hurt, all gone in a week. 1 week, it's all gone. The hip feels great. The lower back feels great. I'm telling you, walking is magic. Finding reasons and ways to walk more should be your goal for 2021. Really. Park further away from things and walk. Walk to places that you can walk to. Start walking more. I guarantee whatever it is that your goals are, and to be stronger, to be leaner, to be more muscular, to be healthier, to have better blood pressure, to have a faster working brain. I guarantee you, I'm saying this, and I know you're going to say, Carl, how can you say that? How do you know? It all starts with walking more. I got a good feeling about this. So in 2021, I hope that everybody makes the effort to walk more. I'm going to work up to 5 miles a day. Aaron has a group of people. They have a challenge, 500 miles in 100 days. I'm going to be part of that group very shortly. So right now I'm at 45 minutes. Soon I'll go to an hour. And once I'm at an hour and above, then it's game on. I'm going to do 5 miles a day. Every single morning I'm going to start my day. By the way, no more caffeine. I gave up caffeine completely. So here's another fascinating thing. Remember how I've been saying for so long that I really believe that caffeine, coffee, more importantly, is at the root of a lot of gut problems in this. I'm actually getting some good walking shoes now, Peter, because the shoes I have are unstable. I'm getting the Brooks Glycerin. Those are the ones that Aaron walks in. He says they're the best walking shoes you can find. Brooks Glycerin. I'm going to get those. But yes, I need good walking shoes. Absolutely. But what I was saying was the other thing that I discovered. So we were talking about coffee, and I gave up coffee. And Aaron said to me, by the way, first of all, Aaron Singerman is in the best shape I've ever seen him in. And I've seen him prepare for bodybuilding competitions. His upper body is massive. His shoulders are huge. His arms are huge. It tapers down to this tiny little midsection. Boom. And then these big tree trunk legs just sprout out. Aaron looks fantastic. He said, I can't drink coffee. I said, why? He says, it gives me bubble gut. And I've talked about this on the show. I said, a lot of people have distended stomachs because of the coffee that they drink. I'm more convinced of it than ever. I think people who pay attention to their bodies, like bodybuilders, will tell you that when they drink coffee, their stomach starts to pooch out. We're going to find in the next 10 years, coffee is at the root of all the gut problems in America, and all the gut problems in America at the root of all of the autoimmune disorders. You eliminate coffee and your autoimmune diseases will go away. Not overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not even happening to me overnight. It took years for your gut to get effed up. It could take years for it to get better, but it's easy to stick to a plan when you're confident that you're going in the right direction. Eliminate coffee for 2021. Try it. See what happens. See what beneficial things happen. That's it for today. Please share the show and help us grow the audience, because the more people we reach, the more people we can help. All right, we'll see you tomorrow with more Superhuman Radio, and thank you for being here today.